Long ago, in a distant land, there was a kingdom named Rose. One day, a young mage named Rhine arrived at the edge of its vast forest. They whispered tales about him in hushed tones, of how he could make withered flowers bloom with a gesture, command harps to sing without a touch, and brew potions so potent they healed wounds and cured ailments no physician dared attempt. When the poor fell ill or injured, and coin could buy no mercy, they sought out the boy with silver hair and ageless eyes, and he never turned them away. Rhine's remedies were miraculous. Whether a fevered child or a farmer's shattered leg, his patients always left healed. Word of his magic drifted from village to village, until eventually it reached the royal palace itself. The king and queen of Rose, though long married, remained without an heir. Their hearts ached for a child. So, when they heard of a mysterious mage healing peasants for no more than a thank you, they sent for him at once. The carriage bumped along the road to the palace. Inside, Rhine sat quietly, his delicate face reflected in the window's glass. He looked no older than 12, his slender frame wrapped in a robe far too regal for the boyish features beneath its hood. Silvery hair framed his pale, near-translucent skin, and his cool, pale blue eyes gleamed with thought. "So many years, and still, I look the same," he murmured to his reflection. "I'm not just a mage in this world. I may be something more." 3 years had passed since Rhine was transported to this fantastical realm, a world brimming with magic, witches, and legends that mirrored the tales from Earth's own fairy stories. Here, sorcerers could bend nations, transform cities into menageries, and summon storms with a word. And yet, Rhine, blessed with the identity of a mage upon arrival, had started with little more than potion brewing skills. No powerful fireballs, no soaring flight, no storms at his fingertips. Only herbs, cauldrons, and healing hands. Still, not all was hopeless. With him had come a fragment of knowledge, a secret method to grow stronger. By helping others fulfill their wishes, especially those fated to become great, the so-called children of destiny, Rhine could absorb a mysterious energy known as destiny energy, which in turn would evolve as magic. Even helping ordinary people granted him faint traces of this energy, but they were insignificant, mere wisps of magic that amounted to little. And so, Rhine healed relentlessly, hoping that one day, someone truly special would cross his path. But after 3 years of tending the sick and injured across the kingdom, not once had he encountered a child of destiny. Still, the gratitude of those he helped, and the healing magic it brought, was more than enough to keep him going. Now, his reputation had finally reached the ears of royalty. As the palace grew near, Rhine lifted his hand, summoning a soft glow from his palm. The magic was warm, white, and comforting, a light that pulsed with life. Healing magic, a product of years spent fulfilling wishes for recovery. Fitting, Rhine thought. A healer's path leads to healing magic. But without a true child of destiny, this is as far as I'll go. The carriage slowed, escorted by armored soldiers. Rhine eyed them with a rueful smile. "Even one of these men could defeat me in a fight," he mused. "I'm a mage, and yet so painfully weak. If I don't find a child of destiny soon, I'll remain this way forever." The carriage stopped before the towering palace gates. Inside the royal hall, Rhine stood alone before the king and queen, both cloaked in elegant sorrow. The king, aged and tired, spoke first. "O sage of the forest, your name has spread throughout the land. They say your healing surpasses any physician's, that your hands work miracles." His tone darkened. "But no miracle has come for us. The queen and I have been together for many years, yet we remain without a child. I grow old. The kingdom needs an heir. Please," the king whispered, "if there is anything you can do to help us, we beg of you." Rhine's heart skipped a beat. A simple request, yet the air trembled with power. A colossal surge of wish energy poured into the room, enveloping Rhine like a tidal wave. It was more than he had felt in all 3 years combined. He froze. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. There was no mistaking it. The king and queen, They were children of destiny. If he could fulfill this wish, the power he'd receive could catapult him into the realm of the legendary. He bowed his head, thoughts racing. His healing abilities were potent. If the cause was a physical ailment, he could surely mend it. But this was a magical world. Infertility here might not be medical, it could be cursed. As doubt flickered in his eyes, the king spoke again, offering reassurance. Even if you cannot help us, we understand. I have summoned 12 of the 13 great witches in this kingdom. Not one succeeded. Ryan's head snapped up. 12, he echoed. The king nodded solemnly. The 13th witch. I dare not summon. She is a master of curses, feared by all. Her name is Maleficent. A chill passed down Ryan's spine. 12 good witches. One dark one. A kingdom yearning for a royal child. His heart pounded. This wasn't just any magical world. This was the kingdom of Sleeping Beauty. In most versions of Sleeping Beauty, the story begins with the birth of a long-awaited princess, blessed by 12 kind witches and cursed by one. But in others, it begins earlier, much earlier, with a wish for a child. Ryan now found himself standing at the very origin of the tale, before the story had begun, before the princess had even been conceived. So I really have arrived before the fairy tale begins, he thought, eyes widening. The realization struck him with both awe and excitement. The king and queen of this kingdom, soon to be the parents of Sleeping Beauty, were not just any nobles. They were true children of destiny. Their wish was not merely heartfelt. It was fated, and fate, Ryan knew, was his key to power. He bowed with calm grace, suppressing his astonishment. His voice was clear, composed. Your Majesties, there is no need for despair. I believe I can help you realize your wish. The king stirred, startled. He leaned forward as if to confirm the young mage's words, his old eyes searching Ryan's pale, youthful face for truth. Beside him, the queen, who had remained silent until now, lifted her gaze. There was disbelief in her expression, yes, but also hope. A quiet, fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. After watching 12 of the most powerful witches in the land fail to provide a solution, she had long since stopped hoping. Their magic had done nothing. Their blessings empty. She had expected nothing from this boy. And yet, the steady certainty in his eyes unsettled her doubts. Could this child really succeed where so many others failed? Ryan raised his hand, the motion elegant, deliberate. A gentle incantation passed his lips, and a soft white glow bloomed in his palm, radiating warmth and peace. The light bathed the king and queen, seeping into their bodies like sunlight melting snow. This was no ordinary light. It was healing magic, magic born from 3 years of tending to the sick, fulfilling small wishes, and accumulating faint traces of destiny energy from 1,000 grateful hearts. The aging rulers felt their aches dissolve, old pains soothed, vitality slowly returning. The king blinked. This is extraordinary, he murmured. The queen touched her chest lightly, stunned. She hadn't felt this light in years. When the glow faded, the king leaned forward, eager. Master Ryan, is it done? Ryan shook his head gently. Not yet. This was only the first step. For the treatment to be complete, a special remedy must be taken. He requested parchment and ink and quickly penned a detailed prescription. Follow this recipe exactly, Ryan instructed. Take it daily, and the blessing of a child will surely follow. He hesitated as he handed it over. His expression turned thoughtful. There is one ingredient that may prove difficult to find. I do not know if it exists within your kingdom. The king took the paper with a dismissive smile. What rare herb could possibly evade the reach of a monarch? He scanned the ingredients. Most were familiar, accessible, until the last line. His smile vanished. What is the meaning of this? He asked, eyes narrowing. Ingredient. A blessing spoken in human language by an aquatic creature. Usage. A fish or frog must voice a wish for the queen to bear a child. The king's voice turned cold. Even in a world of magic, no fish I know speaks the language of men. Ryan remained composed. Let us leave that to fate, your majesty. Destiny will show the way. For a moment, the hall fell silent. Rhine's calm words rang hollow in the king's ears. He'd heard this kind of evasive mysticism before. Whenever healers or sages reached the limits of their abilities, they cloaked their failure in riddles and rare ingredients, impossible conditions that absolved them of blame. The king sighed, heavy with disappointment. So even you cannot help us. Rhine said nothing. He couldn't reveal the truth, not yet, that this kingdom was bound by story, and that events had to unfold this way. That he knew the queen's blessing would come, exactly as it always had. In one version, from a fish. In another, from a frog. It didn't matter which. What mattered was that it was coming. Destiny would see to it. But how could a weary old king, with 12 failures behind him, believe that? The monarch waved a hand. Very well. You have done your part. You shall be rewarded with silver and gold. Rhine bowed. I thank you, your majesty. He turned to leave, his mission complete, almost. Wait. The queen's voice called after him, gentle but insistent. Rhine paused. She stood, eyes shining with something dangerously close to belief. Master Rhine, she said softly, tell me, if this works, will our child be a boy or a girl? What kind of person will they be? The king chuckled under his breath, amused by her question. But Rhine turned slowly, the folds of his robe shifting like mist. He bowed low, then raised his gaze, his pale blue eyes glinting like starlight. Your child will be a girl, he said. A beautiful, intelligent princess. She will carry a fate unlike any other and walk a path of legend. She will become the heroine of an extraordinary tale. 3 months passed, and in that time, the king had quietly let go of hope. He continued taking Rhine's remedy, out of duty more than belief. But deep down, he had accepted the inevitable. His brother would inherit the throne. There would be no heir. Still, the remedy was not without effect. His strength returned. His step lightened. His spirits lifted, though he would never admit it. The queen, on the other hand, never once stopped believing. Rhine's words played in her mind like a lullaby, his voice calm and absolute. She will become the heroine of an extraordinary tale. A princess. She could almost see her, laughing, running barefoot through the palace gardens. The queen dreamed often now of rivers and blessings and girls with golden hair. And as the days grew longer and spring began to bloom across the land, she made a quiet decision. Perhaps if no fish will come to me, then I must go to the water myself.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Rhine was slightly stunned. I'm the one to name Sleeping Beauty? To personally participate in a tale as familiar as this, giving a name to the heroine who hasn't even been born yet, felt surreal to Rhine. The queen nodded gently. The king smiled knowingly, gesturing for the slightly astonished Rhine to proceed boldly. As the ancient sages have said, a name marks the beginning of a newborn's destiny, setting the direction of their life. It is a tradition in our kingdom for learned sages to name the newborn. In my kingdom, no one is more suited to name our daughter than you, Lord Rhine. The young mage lowered his head in thought, ideas flickering in his bright eyes. There have been countless versions of Sleeping Beauty throughout history. The heroine's name isn't consistent across them. In some versions, she's even simply referred to as the princess. After a brief moment of contemplation, Rhine came to a decision. Let's call her Aurora, the little princess. Rhine spread his arms, his voice rising. The name means dawn, the light of a new day. No matter how deep or dark the night, dawn will always come. May hope and light illuminate the little princess's future. This wasn't a name Rhine chose lightly. Aurora had been the name of Sleeping Beauty's daughter in one version of the tale. Tchaikovsky adapted it into the name of the princess herself in his ballet, which Disney's Sleeping Beauty later popularized. Since then, whether translated as Aurora or other variations, Aurora had become the most recognized name for Sleeping Beauty across the world. Arnigerianira. Rhine simply went along with the flow of destiny and chose this beautiful name. Aurora. What a lovely name, the queen exclaimed, clapping softly in delight. The king was also pleased. Lord Rhine, after Princess Aurora is born, I plan to hold a grand banquet. At that time, I will invite 12 witches from across the kingdom to bless the newborn princess. And I must also ask you, Lord Rhine, our learned mage, to offer your blessings to the princess as well. Placing a hand over his chest, Rhine responded with a smile. It would be my honor. But after speaking, his expression grew more serious. He knew what lay ahead. The well-known story of Sleeping Beauty. At Aurora's baptismal celebration, the kingdom's 13th witch, the infamous Black Witch Maleficent, would intrude, furious at being excluded. She would curse the newborn princess, dooming her to die at the age of 15 by pricking her finger on a spindle. In some versions of the story, the king excluded the 13th, which simply because there were only 12 golden platters for the guests. A blood feud sparked by something so trivial. But that wasn't the whole story. The greater reason was that the king himself disliked the Black Witch. Contemplating this impending curse, Rhine's eyes narrowed slightly. Was this a fate he could change? Raising his head, his expression solemn under his hood, Rhine addressed the king as a kingdom sage. Your Majesty, if there are 13 powerful witches in the kingdom, wouldn't excluding one of them cause resentment? Especially considering Maleficent's temperament. She is not one to forgive easily. Deliberately ignoring her, could that invite disaster? Maleficent, that was the name Rhine had recently learned belonged to the Black Witch. Hearing Rhine's words, the king's eyes froze. A chill ran down his spine, and dread seeped into his bones. He had overlooked such a critical issue. Thanks to Rhine's reminder, he realized just how reckless his decision had been and the dangers it entailed. Maleficent was the strongest and most vengeful of the 13 witches. A baptismal ceremony is grand, as this would be known throughout the kingdom. If Maleficent weren't invited, she would undoubtedly take offense. The mere thought of the potential disaster made the king break out in a cold sweat. As a mere mortal king, he couldn't afford to provoke such a powerful witch. Legendary mages had lifespans that stretched to near eternity, enough to witness the rise and fall of kingdoms. To them, mortal kings and their power were insignificant. If they wished, they could curse or destroy an entire kingdom at will. Even the items they created, should they fall into the wrong hands, could spell doom for an entire realm. History told many tales of a poor peasant stumbling upon an ancient mage's artifact, easily toppling the noble who oppressed him and ascending as the new ruler of a kingdom. Although the king couldn't be certain whether Maleficent possessed such terrifying power, he dared not take the risk. Fortunately, Rhine had warned him in time. Lord Rhine, thank you for the reminder. If we don't invite Maleficent, she will certainly bear a grudge. In that case, I will treat all the witches equally and invite every one of them in the kingdom. Under normal circumstances, the king wouldn't dare allow the Black Witch into his palace. But on the day of the princess's baptism, with 12 other witches and Lord Rhine present, Maleficent would have no opportunity to cause trouble, or so the king believed. Seeing the king accept his advice, Rhine nodded slightly and said no more. He had already plucked the strings of fate. The original cause of Maleficent's curse on Sleeping Beauty was no longer present. Would the story's direction change? Time flew by, and several days passed since Rhine had given his counsel. The king, keeping Rhine's advice in mind, planned to invite all 13 witches to the palace after the little princess's birth. Together with Rhine, now the court mage, they would bless Princess Aurora. The king was busy preparing for this grand celebration. But soon, he encountered a problem. The palace's tableware for the highest-ranking guests consisted of exquisite golden platters adorned with intricate, luxurious patterns. There were exactly 12 of them, no more, no less. If all 13 witches were invited, there wouldn't be enough golden platters. And it wasn't as if they could use golden platters for the 12 witches while giving the Black Witch Maleficent a silver platter instead. She would undoubtedly fly into a rage and curse the entire kingdom. In that case, it might be better not to invite her at all. As for Sage Rhine, being part of the court, he would use tableware just as ornate but distinct in design from those prepared for the guests. so no special arrangements were necessary for him. Thus, the king summoned the kingdom's veteran craftsman, who had served faithfully all his life, and gave him an order. You and your craftsmen are to create a golden platter identical in style to those prepared for the other honored guests. Use this gold for the task. Make sure the new platter matches the existing ones perfectly. The old craftsman returned home after receiving the order and happened to meet his younger brother, Oz, who had come back that day. Unlike his older brother, Oz was a prodigious magician. Oz had always detested their family's destiny of serving as royal craftsmen for generations. From a young age, he had idolized the legendary mages in the tales, those who wielded miraculous powers. He dreamed of becoming one of those witches or wizards who could summon storms and command the elements. However, as he grew older, Oz came to realize that, like most people, he was just an ordinary mortal with no chance of wielding real magic. Still, he couldn't abandon his childhood dream entirely. Instead, he took up the art of illusion, learning how to deceive the eyes of his audience with gestures, props, and performances, achieving feats that were almost like real magic. Oz became an exceptional magician. Unlike his traditionalist brother, Oz was a creative genius, constantly brimming with fresh ideas. Using chemical reactions, stage lighting effects, and advanced performance techniques, he invented hundreds of novel tricks, gradually earning recognition as the greatest magician of his era. Oz's fame grew as he toured several kingdoms, performing to audiences from all walks of life. People praised him, cheering wildly for his breathtaking shows. Basking in the flowers and applause, Oz sometimes felt like he truly was a mage of extraordinary power. Today, now a middle-aged man, Oz teased his brother after hearing about the new task. The king must really trust you all, just handing over that gold to you and your craftsmen. If it were me, I might be tempted to keep a little for myself. Haha. After all, I make a living fooling people. Look at me. I deceive everyone on stage, and they gladly pay me for it. Oz spoke casually, not giving his words much thought, and soon went off to bed. But his offhand remarks lingered in the old craftsman's mind. Yes, why hadn't I ever thought of keeping a little for myself? The court jesters, those fools with their flattery and jokes, were handsomely rewarded. And here I am, having served the king diligently my entire life, with less wealth and status than those clowns. I deserve better. Creating a golden platter was an effortless task for a master craftsman of his caliber. Over the years, his skill had reached the peak of perfection. He knew every step of the process, every inspection method, and every tiny vulnerability in the system. The old craftsman was confident that he could mix in a bit of cheaper metal and keep some gold for himself without anyone ever noticing. Meanwhile, as the king prepared for the little princess's baptism, Ryan was adjusting to his new role as the royal advisor, court mage, and sage of the kingdom. Now, his authority was second only to the king. Of course, Ryan wasn't particularly impressed by this. This small kingdom, with its limited population and territory, was hardly worth boasting about. Becoming its sage, even becoming its king, wouldn't mean much. In this fantastical world of extraordinary power, Ryan was far more interested in two things: the mysteries of magic and the world itself. Upon assuming his position as court mage, Ryan immediately issued two orders. The first was to have a servant retrieve the kingdom's spellbook, a tome passed down for centuries. It was the key to becoming a truly powerful mage. The second was to obtain the most detailed map of the world available in the kingdom, along with a stack of books and records about foreign lands and global affairs from the royal archives. What kind of world have I ended up in? What lies beyond the kingdom of Sleeping Beauty? Ryan burned with curiosity, eager for answers. The hooded youth pored over the documents scattered across the table. His fingers moved across the map, connecting the nations depicted with the content of the texts. In this era of limited productivity, the maps were painfully crude, chaotic drawings, distorted scales, and large areas purely imagined. But with enough documents and records to cross-reference, they weren't entirely useless. At first, Ryan read the documents with a calm expression, a faint smile on his lips. But as he continued reading, his smile gradually froze, his expression turning increasingly serious. By the end, his hands holding the book trembled, and cold sweat poured from his forehead. Why is it like this? Ron had assumed he'd traveled to the story of Sleeping Beauty. He thought the world beyond the kingdom wouldn't be particularly unusual, just a typical Western fantasy setting. But after learning about the continent's broader landscape, he realized how wrong he had been. The known world consisted of a single continent. The West was fragmented into countless small kingdoms, like stars scattered across the sky. The kingdom of Sleeping Beauty was just one of these many kingdoms. In the eastern regions, the culture resembled the Arabic culture of Earth. As for the Far East, the court documents were vague, mentioning only a distant and prosperous empire with a mysterious and splendid culture. Why does this sound so familiar? Ryan's mouth twitched slightly. What truly shocked Ryan, however, were the details where folklore and reality seemed to blur. Historical records suggest that castles built by giants can be found on certain thick clouds. In the vast ocean, there exists a kingdom inhabited by mermaids and sea witches. A world traveler claimed to have fallen into a rabbit hole and accidentally entered a bizarre and wondrous realm. A traveler from the Middle Eastern deserts spoke of their land's extraordinary marvels: flying carpets, giant eagle-like beasts, and powerful spirits trapped in vessels who grant wishes to mortals. An elder from a distant Eastern empire said that immortals dwell in their mountains, and the flow of time in their caves differs from the outside world. What kind of patchwork world have I ended up in? Ryan couldn't help but rant inwardly. One familiar story title after another surfaced in his mind. Jack and the Beanstalk, The Little Mermaid, Alice in Wonderland, The Fisherman and the Genie, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. I don't even know what era this is. Have these stories I know so well from my previous life already become history? Or are they like Sleeping Beauty, yet to unfold? The earlier the era, the more freedom I'll have to make an impact. Once I've resolved the matter of little Princess Aurora and become a more powerful mage, I absolutely have to venture beyond this kingdom. Ryan made up his mind. He then picked up the spell book from the table, the Book of Transformation and Summoning. Eagerly, Ryan flipped open the yellowed pages. What greeted him were strange, cryptic symbols and text. According to the king, this tome had been passed down for centuries. It was said that only those who truly understood magic could comprehend its contents. Without a proper mage to claim it, this priceless treasure had been left neglected, sealed in the depths of the library. When the witches of the kingdom showed an interest in it, the old king had offered them a deal. The spellbook in exchange for one of them serving as the court's advisor for a few years. RN. The offer had been unanimously declined. Clearly, the book held some appeal for the powerful witches, but not enough to make them bow to royal authority. This rejection had left the king so disheartened that when he invited Ryan to serve as the court's advisor, he was especially cautious, offering the most generous terms from the outset. The moment Ryan opened the book, he immediately confirmed the legends were true. As a true mage, he could automatically understand every strange and twisted symbol in the book. Flipping through its pages at lightning speed, Ryan's excitement grew as he discovered its contents were exactly what he had hoped for. The magic Ryan had gained upon crossing into this world had come to him automatically, without a teacher. His knowledge of the occult and supernatural was severely lacking. This book provided an extensive foundation in magical knowledge, perfectly filling in the gaps. What's more, it recorded numerous practical spells. Those 12 witches must be far stronger than I am right now. Yet their pride stopped them from becoming court advisors, leaving this book untouched. Devouring the pages hungrily, the silver-haired boy's grin grew wider and brighter. In most versions of Sleeping Beauty, the story begins with the birth of a long-awaited princess, blessed by 12 kind witches and cursed by one. But in others, it begins earlier, much earlier, with a wish for a child. Ryan now found himself standing at the very origin of the tale, before the story had begun, before the princess had even been conceived. So I really have arrived before the fairy tale begins, he thought, eyes widening. The realization struck him with both awe and excitement. The king and queen of this kingdom, soon to be the parents of Sleeping Beauty, were not just any nobles. They were true children of destiny. Their wish was not merely heartfelt. It was fated, and fate, Ryan knew, was his key to power. He bowed with calm grace, suppressing his astonishment. His voice was clear, composed. Your Majesties, there is no need for despair. I believe I can help you realize your wish. The king stirred, startled. He leaned forward as if to confirm the young mage's words, his old eyes searching Ryan's pale, youthful face for truth. Beside him, the queen, who had remained silent until now, lifted her gaze. There was disbelief in her expression, yes, but also hope. A quiet, fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. After watching 12 of the most powerful witches in the land fail to provide a solution, she had long since stopped hoping. Their magic had done nothing, their blessings empty. She had expected nothing from this boy, and yet the steady certainty in his eyes unsettled her doubts. Could this child really succeed where so many others failed? Ryan raised his hand, the motion elegant, deliberate. A gentle incantation passed his lips, and a soft white glow bloomed in his palm, radiating warmth and peace. The light bathed the king and queen, seeping into their bodies like sunlight melting snow. This was no ordinary light. It was healing magic, magic born from 3 years of tending to the sick, fulfilling small wishes, and accumulating faint traces of destiny energy from 1,000 grateful hearts. The aging rulers felt their aches dissolve, old pains soothed, vitality slowly returning. The king blinked. This is extraordinary, he murmured. The queen touched her chest lightly, stunned. She hadn't felt this light in years. When the glow faded, the king leaned forward, eager. Master Ryan, is it done? Ryan shook his head gently. Not yet. This was only the first step. For the treatment to be complete, a special remedy must be taken. He requested parchment and ink and quickly penned a detailed prescription. Follow this recipe exactly, Ryan instructed. Take it daily, and the blessing of a child will surely follow. He hesitated as he handed it over. His expression turned thoughtful. There is one ingredient that may prove difficult to find. I do not know if it exists within your kingdom. The king took the paper with a dismissive smile. What rare herb could possibly evade the reach of a monarch? He scanned the ingredients. Most were familiar, accessible, until the last line. His smile vanished. What is the meaning of this? He asked, eyes narrowing. Ingredient. A blessing spoken in human language by an aquatic creature. Usage. A fish or frog must voice a wish for the queen to bear a child. The king's voice turned cold. Even in a world of magic, no fish I know speaks the language of men. Ryan remained composed. Let us leave that to fate, your majesty. Destiny will show the way. For a moment, the hall fell silent. Ryan's calm words rang hollow in the king's ears. He'd heard this kind of evasive mysticism before. Whenever healers or sages reached the limits of their abilities, they cloaked their failure in riddles and rare ingredients, impossible conditions that absolved them of blame. The king sighed, heavy with disappointment. So even you cannot help us. Ryan said nothing. He couldn't reveal the truth, not yet, that this kingdom was bound by story, and that events had to unfold this way. That he knew the queen's blessing would come, exactly as it always had. In one version, from a fish. In another, from a frog. It didn't matter which. What mattered was that it was coming. Destiny would see to it. But how could a weary old king, with 12 failures behind him, believe that? The monarch waved a hand. Very well. You have done your part. You shall be rewarded with silver and gold. Ryan bowed. I thank you, your majesty. He turned to leave, his mission complete, almost. Wait. The queen's voice called after him, gentle but insistent. Ryan paused. She stood, eyes shining with something dangerously close to belief. Master Ryan, she said softly, tell me, if this works, will our child be a boy or a girl? What kind of person will they be? The king chuckled under his breath, amused by her question. But Rhine turned slowly, the folds of his robe shifting like mist. He bowed low, then raised his gaze, his pale blue eyes glinting like starlight. "Your child will be a girl," he said. "A beautiful, intelligent princess. She will carry a fate unlike any other and walk a path of legend. She will become the heroine of an extraordinary tale." 3 months passed, and in that time, the king had quietly let go of hope. He continued taking Rhine's remedy, out of duty more than belief. But deep down, he had accepted the inevitable. His brother would inherit the throne. There would be no heir. Still, the remedy was not without effect. His strength returned. His step lightened. His spirits lifted, though he would never admit it. The queen, on the other hand, never once stopped believing. Rhine's words played in her mind like a lullaby, his voice calm and absolute. She will become the heroine of an extraordinary tale. A princess. She could almost see her, laughing, running barefoot through the palace gardens. The queen dreamed often now of rivers and blessings and girls with golden hair. And as the days grew longer and spring began to bloom across the land, she made a quiet decision. "Perhaps if no fish will come to me, then I must go to the water myself." This way, Lord Rhine. Rhine draped himself in a luxurious, pure white robe trimmed with gold, custom-tailored for the ceremony. Surrounded by attendants, he entered the grand and opulent hall. The young mage maintained a steady stride, his robe flowing gracefully with each step, exuding an air of elegance and noble demeanor. Gently gathering the hem of his robe, Rhine sat elegantly in the ornate seat beside the king and queen, his rightful place as the sage of the forest. Compared to his initial entry into the palace months ago, Rhine now carried himself with far more poise and confidence. The past half-year had been anything but dull for the young man, as he immersed himself daily in the wonders of magic. Indeed, the supernatural power of magic was an irresistible lure. With astonishing talent and months of dedicated practice, Rhine had long outgrown his former self, who could barely perform basic tricks. Based on the information he had gathered over the past half-year about the witches, Rhine speculated that his current level of magic might even rival that of Violet Fairy, the leader of the kingdom's 12 good witches. However, he was certain he could not compare to Maleficent, the legendary black witch said to wield magic that could blanket the entire kingdom. Pulling himself from his musings, Rhine surveyed the noble guests entering along the crimson carpet, sharing in the joyous atmosphere. Tonight marked the baptism ceremony of Princess Aurora, a night of celebration throughout the kingdom. For the king and queen, long without an heir, the birth of a child was a momentous occasion, warranting unprecedented rejoicing. Across the realm, even minor criminals were pardoned, unpaid taxes were deferred, and all measures ensured the festive mood remained unspoiled. From the nobility to the common folk, everyone blessed the birth of the little princess. In distant streets and alleys, vendors discussed the evening's festivities, while farmers in remote villages chatted about the princess's birth. In the capital, the heart of the celebration, the joy was indescribable. The city did not sleep. The lights burned bright, ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and songs of jubilation filled the air. Royals and nobles from distant lands had journeyed here, their entourages splendidly dressed, bearing lavish gifts to honor the newborn princess, Aurora. What an incredible display! Rhine remarked from his seat as court mage, observing the procession of foreign guests. There are no less than 16 delegations from different nations here for this celebration. One by one, foreign royals approached the king, presenting generous gifts and offering heartfelt blessings for the princess's birth, their words dripping with praise. Rhine narrowed his eyes slightly. The grander and more solemn the ceremony, the thicker the air of joy, the more Rhine worried about unforeseen disruptions. And now, let us welcome the 13 powerful witches. The 13 witches made their way along the crimson carpet into the venue. Dressed in vibrant attire, each wore a distinct primary color. Together, they appeared like a rainbow from a distance. Yet one among them stood out, a striking contrast to the others. At the end of the procession, a tall witch clad in black and violet robes exuded a dark beauty and icy elegance. She alternated between a frosty demeanor and sudden bouts of hysterical laughter. At times, she waved at those around her. At others, she muttered to herself, seemingly unstable. The other 12 witches maintained a deliberate distance from this peculiar figure, the Black Witch. Unlike the original storyline, she, too, had received an invitation from a king. At the sight of the Black Witch, the old king visibly trembled. Clearly, he harbored a deep fear of this infamous master of dark magic. "Thank goodness I haven't done anything to offend her," the king thought, patting his chest to steady himself. Besides, with the other 12 witches present, and Lord Rhine, surely everything would be fine. He stole a glance at the slender boy seated beside him. "What a wonderful day! So many guests have arrived," exclaimed the Black Witch, her tone fluctuating wildly. "The prince from the northern kingdom is here, the knights from the western kingdom, and a delegation from the eastern desert sultanate bearing splendid gifts. Oh, so many royals and nobles have come. I thought someone like me, a monster, wouldn't get an invitation. Oh, ha ha, I'm so happy." Her laughter rang out, a loud, theatrical sound as she doubled over, clutching her stomach as though hearing the funniest joke. Her exaggerated movements left those nearby visibly tense. Omicron ES. Ignoring the wary stares, the Black Witch joined the others, seating herself among them. Before each of the 13 witches lay an ornate golden plate. "Honored guests, please begin your meal. Let us celebrate this wonderful evening together." With the king's proclamation, the nobles, foreign dignitaries, and the 13 witches began enjoying the lavish feast before them. Glancing at Rhine, seated beside him, the king sought any sign of comment or concern from the young sage of the forest. However, Rhine remained silent, entirely engrossed in his meal. His composed demeanor reassured the king. "Of course, Lord Rhine is as steady as ever. Perhaps I was worrying too much." The old king exhaled in relief. Rhine deftly cut another piece of roasted steak, savoring the rich and juicy flavor as it melted in his mouth. "Delicious. This is leagues better than the usual fare." He continued to indulge, balancing his status with the need to devour every bite within the bounds of dignity and elegance. After all, it's a celebration. Who has time to talk? Meals are for eating. The young mage also ensured to keep one eye on the Black Witch, discreetly observing her. She appeared indifferent to the food, taking only a few bites before staring at her plate in silence. Her expression remained icy, devoid of malice, but unnervingly cold. As dinner concluded, an announcement echoed through the hall. "And now, we invite the 13 witches and court mage Lord Rhine to bestow their blessings upon the princess." One by one, the witches stepped forward to the ornate cradle where Princess Aurora lay, their blessings beginning. "Princess Aurora, I grant you unparalleled beauty, the greatest in the world. Your visage shall be unmatched, your charm captivating all who gaze upon you. Every smile, every glance will ensnare hearts and turn the world itself toward you." The first witch's blessing shone brightly, a dazzling light erupting from the cradle, illuminating the grand hall as though transforming night into dawn. The radiance surrounding the infant gradually subsided, revealing the baby's features subtly shifting. Her skin grew fairer, smoother, a budding beauty unfolding within the cradle. Normally, a newborn could hardly be considered attractive, yet the supernatural blessing defied nature itself. Even in her swaddling clothes, the princess exuded an extraordinary aura of grace. It was easy to imagine her as an enchanting young woman in the years to come. The king and queen beamed with joy, their delight palpable. Just the first blessing had wrought such transformation. What wonders would the combined blessings of the witches and Lord Rhine bring? "This is the power of a witch's blessing? It's incredible," the queen marveled. Rhine's calm voice came from beside her. "Your Majesties, I suspect you might wonder why the witch who bestowed this blessing, herself only modest in appearance, could grant such unparalleled beauty to Princess Aurora? The king and queen blinked in surprise. What? That thought hadn't crossed our minds. They hadn't even questioned the oddity that someone without such beauty could grant it as a blessing. Noting their puzzled expressions, Rhine smiled. Blessings, he explained, represent the most extraordinary and illogical powers in fairy tales, myths, and folklore. They define natural laws, achieve causal miracles, and often result in paradoxical outcomes. The remarkable thing is that the recipient of the blessing can often achieve what the caster cannot. Rhine elaborated further, pointing out myths like those of Indian gods, where heroes granted blessings could overthrow deities, only to be outmaneuvered themselves. Similarly, the Norse hero Siegfried, made invincible by bathing in dragon's blood, exemplified a form of blessing. Yet the dragon itself, the source of the blood, obviously lacked such invincibility. Otherwise, how was it slain? Months of studying the spellbook had not only expanded Rhine's magical repertoire, but also deepened his understanding of the mystical and supernatural. Addressing the bewildered king and queen, he continued patiently. A blessing draws power not only from the one who bestows it, but from the world itself. The greater the hero, the more legendary the individual, the stronger the blessing they receive. That's why blessings can achieve feats even the caster cannot. And in this case, the subject of the blessings is none other than Princess Aurora. Rhine trailed off, letting his words sink in, then sighed meaningfully. The queen remained silent for a moment before realization dawned. Could Lord Rhine mean that Princess Aurora is destined to be a legendary figure? That would make sense. Didn't he say the same thing when we first met? That our daughter would have a fateful destiny? What kind of blessing will Lord Rhine offer her in the end? One by one, the witches stepped forward to bestow their blessings upon the little princess cradled in her ornate bassinet. I grant you a heart of gold. You will be kind, humble, honest, strong, and just. You will show compassion to the weak and possess an unerring sense of right and wrong. I grant you a melodious voice. Your songs will touch the soul, moving even the coldest hearts to tears. I grant you a healthy and resilient body, a perfect form as if crafted by the gods. You will live a lifetime of vitality, immune to fatigue and illness. You will have a flawless memory, effortlessly learning the knowledge of the world. Even the most erudite scholars will be no match for your intellect. Each witch's blessing illuminated the grand hall in radiant light, filling it with an otherworldly brilliance. The witches seemed intent on compiling an exhaustive list of humanity's virtues and bestowing them all upon the princess. As the blessings continued, those presenting later found it increasingly difficult to come up with new gifts. One witch, stepping forward, twitched her lips in visible frustration. The witches before her had already gifted every conceivable virtue to the princess. Was there anything left to give? Noticing her hesitation, Rhine coughed lightly and remarked casually to the queen, as though engaging in idle conversation. With so many blessings, Princess Aurora will undoubtedly be the most perfect child in existence. Perhaps what she needs now is protection from harm and a blessing for a peaceful, happy life. The witch quickly caught on, pivoting her blessing accordingly. Princess Aurora, I grant you invulnerability to all weapons, natural or man-made. Swords, arrows, claws, and fangs will never mar your snow-white skin. The next witch followed suit, granting immunity to the elements. You will not be harmed by water or fire, nor by extreme heat or cold. Rhine couldn't help but smile as he watched the witches pile protective blessings onto the little princess. For those in the know, this was a touching gesture of goodwill. For anyone uninformed, it might have seemed like they were crafting the ultimate biological weapon. Or rather, the opportunity to create such a perfect being was being used simply to allow Aurora to live an ordinary and happy life as a royal princess. A small part of Rhine found it almost wasteful. Soon, all 12 witches had delivered their blessings. This included the eldest witch, Violet Fairy, who in the original tale hadn't had the chance to bestow her blessing before calamity struck. Violet Fairy's gift was one of incredible luck, fortune that could turn misfortune into opportunity. According to the common version of Sleeping Beauty, she was supposed to use her blessing to weaken the Black Witch Maleficent's curse, transforming death into mere slumber. But this time, she finished her blessing before the Black Witch stepped forward. Now, only two individuals remained to bestow their gifts: Maleficent, the Black Witch, and Rhine, the Court Mage. Once certain that all 12 witches had taken their turn, Maleficent laughed. Dressed in her signature black attire, she strode confidently to the cradle, her sharp voice cutting through the air. Nigerian aerobes. Well, the other witches have given such wonderful gifts. What could I possibly offer to our beautiful, perfect, healthy, and kind-hearted princess? She gestured theatrically with her hands. Oh, Princess Aurora, this is the blessing I bestow upon you. You will live a wonderful life for 15 glorious years, filled with happiness and adored by all within and beyond the kingdom. The king, tense with worry, finally exhaled in relief. Her blessing sounds normal. Perhaps we're safe after all. But, in the next moment, Maleficent's voice rose sharply. On your 15th birthday, you will prick your finger on a spindle and die instantly. Her words struck like lightning. Maleficent turned toward the king with a wicked smile, her laughter dripping with venom. And when your daughter dies, so will this kingdom. O king, I curse your daughter in this land. Your sweet child will perish from a simple tool of weaving, not a man-made weapon, nor one of natural origin. She continued, her tone growing darker and more malicious. After the princess breathes her last, the curse will fully descend upon your kingdom. Every noble and commoner alike will meet the same fate. You will succumb to a terrible sickness, coughing, bleeding, writhing on the ground. The next day, as you regain control, you'll find your own hands plunging blades into your throats. Your blood will flow from your homes into the rivers, turning them crimson. The streets will empty, the palace lights will go out, and the sun will fail to rise over this land. Thorns, brambles, and weeds will overrun the barren fields. Any who dare enter this cursed land will find themselves ensnared, tripped, and held down, as if countless unseen hands grip them, dragging them to a painful death. This curse will linger over the once prosperous kingdom forever. With her declaration complete, Maleficent smiled. It was a cold, ruthless beauty. The legendary witch of unmatched power among the 13 bowed deeply toward the king. And thus, I offer my blessing to Princess Aurora and your majesty. Silence. The air seemed to freeze. The grand hall fell into a deathly stillness. Every noble, every foreign prince and princess held their breath. What are you doing? The king shot to his feet in fury. Why? I invited you to this grand banquet, served you a lavish meal, and yet you curse Princess Aurora, curse my kingdom. The king shouted for the guards. Seize her. Arrest this insolent Black Witch. Armed soldiers raised their gleaming weapons, surrounding Maleficent. The other 12 witches, their expressions solemn, raised their wands and aimed at the dark sorceress. Ha ha! Maleficent threw back her head and laughed, wild and unrestrained. Oh, your majesty, you honored me with an invitation, treated me to a splendid feast, and have I not repaid you with the finest of blessings? Crash! With a flick of her finger, a bolt of lightning struck the table, shattering her golden plate. The ornate plate, once so grand, revealed its cheap silvery metal core beneath the gilded exterior. Oh, your majesty, I see, like the rest of your kingdom, you couldn't bear to treat me the same as the other 12 witches. But truthfully, I don't need your recognition. What is a king to me? Even your entire army is nothing more than insects in my eyes. The king froze as he stared at the broken plate, realization dawning in the next moment. No, this is a misunderstanding. The plate should have been pure gold. This must be the fault of the craftsman, cutting corners. Maleficent sneered. A misunderstanding, you say? Huh, what a perfect misunderstanding. I've been waiting for a chance like this. Her cold gaze swept over the 12 witches. I'm the strongest among you all, greater than all of you combined. And yet you fear me, slander me in the shadows, simply because I am more powerful, because I wield the darker forces you cannot comprehend. Now, as I leave this kingdom, I give you my parting gift. The curse is in place, unbreakable unless I die. Watching her twisted expression and unhinged laughter, Rhine sighed inwardly. She's just a hypersensitive, neurotic lunatic. Even if the plate hadn't been faulty, she would have found some other excuse to unleash her madness. The 12 witches had reached their limit. Unable to bear her arrogance any longer, they stepped forward. Don't think you're the only one who knows magic. No matter how powerful you are, you're still just one person. Violet Fairy, the eldest and leader of the 12, pointed her wand at Maleficent and declared, "If your death will lift the curse, then let your sins be judged here and now." The king echoed her call, commanding his soldiers to close in around the Black Witch. But Maleficent stood unflinching in the face of 12 witches and the army that crashed the banquet. "Feel honored. You shall witness my ultimate form." Her words rang out as eerie green flames engulfed her black cloak. Her thin, pale figure expanded rapidly, her body erupting with raw power. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Maleficent had transformed into a massive black dragon. Her head reached the ceiling. Her wings beat with such force that the palace quaked, sending dust and rubble cascading down. Alpha and BS. Foreign dignitaries and nobles screamed. Some fled in every direction, while others scrambled to hide beneath the banquet tables. Without hesitation, Rhine stepped in front of the terrified king and queen. "Stay back. It's too dangerous. Leave this to me." The soldiers launched arrows at the dragon, but they clattered uselessly off her obsidian scales, as futile as eggs striking steel. The 12 witches began casting their spells. One held up a gleaming mirror aimed at the dragon, its surface capable of drawing out the soul of anyone who looked into it. Another pointed her wand, attempting to turn Maleficent into a toad. Yet another sang a haunting melody, seeking to twist and enchant the dragon's mind. But all their efforts were in vain. The dragon shrugged off their magic as though brushing away dust, her resilience shaking the witches to their cores. Pale-faced, their lips quivered as they grasped the unbridgeable gulf between themselves and their former peer. Before them stood a true master of magic, a legendary sorceress capable of erasing a kingdom on a whim. Maleficent unleashed a torrent of sickly green flames, engulfing the hall. Soldiers turned to ash before they could even scream. The 12 good witches barely managed to shield themselves with magic, retreating in disarray, their faces smudged with soot. They looked nothing like their once elegant, aloof selves. "Oh, my dear king, did you truly believe this pitiful rabble could harm me?" The dragon's booming laughter reverberated through the hall. "Foolish king, you could have lived out your days quietly, awaiting the curse's fruition. But since you insist, allow me to make you my next meal." With a powerful beat of her wings, the dragon lunged toward the throne, spewing another wave of blazing green fire. Disaster! Violet Fairy, horrified, saw the inferno surging toward the throne. In her mind, she already envisioned the next moment. The king, queen, and the young Rhine consumed by the flames. The queen, nearly fainting from terror, clung to her chair, helpless. The king, usually stoic, turned pale, closing his eyes as he awaited the inevitable. But the scorching heat never came. Rhine took a step forward, positioning himself between the king and the queen, his arms tracing elegant arcs in the air. Clear springs erupted from the palace floor, conjured out of thin air. The pristine waters transformed into clouds of white mist upon touching the flames, halting their ferocious advance. Even the luxurious carpet sprang to life, curling up protectively around Rhine, the king, and the queen, shielding them from the scalding steam. The old king opened his eyes, catching sight of the youth cloaked in an ornate robe. Only then did he realize what had happened. It was a relief that Lord Rhine, the highly skilled magician, was here. Incredible. Even the black dragon seemed surprised by Rhine's display. The silver-haired boy before her looked far too young, only about 11 or 12 years old. During the banquet, the black witch had heard that this boy seated next to the king was a magician. But due to his youthful appearance, she hadn't taken him seriously. Who would have thought, old man? You actually had an ace up your sleeve. Your court advisor turns out to be such a capable magician. The black dragon sneered. Rhine seized the brief moment of distraction from the dragon's astonishment and clapped his hands lightly. Clap, clap. Tables, chairs, plates, knives, forks, statues. Every object in the grand hall suddenly came alive, darting about, some running, others flying, before swarming toward the black dragon. Life-giving. This was a spell Rhine had mastered after helping the king and queen fulfill their wish for a child. While the soldiers and the 12 good witches had been battling the black dragon, Maleficent in her transformed state, Rhine had been quietly casting this spell. He imbued the lifeless objects in the hall with vitality, creating an army of animated living objects poised for action at just the right moment. The spell had drained most of Rhine's magical energy, but it was entirely worth it. A horde of animated objects sprang into motion, swarming the black dragon. Massive statues drew giant swords and slashed at her, while silver knives and forks desperately sought to pierce the gaps between her obsidian scales. While the animated objects fought, Rhine raised his hands again. Pure white light streamed from his palms, spreading across the grand hall and flowing into the injured soldiers and witches, healing their wounds. Healing magic. The soldiers, who had been fleeing in panic, and the disheveled nobles hiding under tables, which had now run off, regained their composure and spirit. Lord Rhine, the sage of the kingdom, has cast his magic. Lord Rhine has held off the vile black witch. My leg was burned off, wasn't it? How's it back? Thank you, Lord Rhine. Now's our chance. Let's fight together. Seizing this brief respite, the 12 good witches unleashed their full power, expending all their remaining magic. They joined forces with the soldiers to confront the fearsome black dragon. Arnobes, how annoying, the black dragon growled, flapping her wings. Although the attacks from the animated objects, soldiers, and witches hadn't inflicted significant damage, the sheer number of opponents made it difficult for her to keep up. Moments ago, she had unleashed a powerful curse capable of affecting the entire kingdom. Even with a 15-year delay built into the spell, it had drained the majority of her magical energy. Now, with her remaining strength dwindling, crushing this swarm of ants was proving to be no easy feat. Besides, who could say for sure that this unfamiliar young magician wasn't holding back some trump card? If the kingdom sage still had some reserves of power, continuing this fight might leave her injured, or force her to reveal her final card. No matter, the curse was already cast. Why waste energy on a brawl? With a furious roar, the black dragon flapped her wings powerfully, sweeping away the animated objects around her. Boom! She crashed through the palace ceiling, scattering dust and debris, and soared into the starry sky. The black witch's laughter echoed across the boundless night. The curse has been sealed. There is no escape. Tomorrow, I shall leave this dying kingdom behind. Farewell, your majesty, and may you perish along with your precious princess. The old king collapsed to his knees, staring at the gaping hole in the palace ceiling and the settling dust. He watched as the black dragon disappeared into the depths of the night sky, and a wave of helplessness and despair surged in his heart. Around him, foreign dignitaries from various kingdoms scrambled to flee. Many of them planned to warn their home nations to avoid this cursed land at all costs. The earlier joy of the celebration, the scarlet lanterns, jubilant songs, the fragrant feast, and fine wines, now felt like a fleeting dream, easily shattered. Why? Why has it come to this? The old king knelt on the ground, crying out to the heavens. The aged ruler's face was pale, etched with despair. In the cradle, the little princess stirred from her slumber, awakened by the commotion. She gazed around in confusion, unaware of the calamity that had unfolded. The newborn princess had no idea of the curse now weighing upon her. She felt no fear, nor did she cry. Then, to the astonishment of the king, queen, and Rhine, they witnessed an unforgettable scene. Innocent and oblivious, young Aurora waved her tiny hands toward the gaping hole in the palace ceiling. Her gaze reached out to the glittering stars beyond. The swaddled sleeping beauty giggled, her laughter echoing softly under the vast, star-filled sky. Rhine dusted off his cloak, now soiled with dirt, and slowly stepped behind the king. Though this was a tale he had heard countless times, experiencing it firsthand, witnessing the joys and sorrows of everyone involved brought a different kind of melancholy to his heart. Compared to the more widely known version of Sleeping Beauty, the curse placed by the Black Witch here was far more cruel. It wouldn't just take the little princess's life, but would also doom the entire kingdom to destruction. The spindle pricking the little princess's finger, leading to her tragic death, was merely the harbinger of the curse's fulfillment, a prelude to the grand catastrophe. In hindsight, such a devastating curse seemed more fitting for its purpose. According to the original story, the 12th witch used her final blessing to weaken the curse, changing death into sleep. Even after the curse was weakened, when the little princess pricked her finger on the spindle, its power still plunged the entire kingdom into slumber. The kingdom, then overgrown with malicious thorns, brambles, and vines, became a cursed land no traveler dared approach. Only 100 years later did the destined prince cut through the thorns, enter the cursed kingdom, and break the spell with a kiss for the Sleeping Beauty. If a weakened curse could make an entire kingdom sleep for 100 years, then the original curse's full force would undoubtedly annihilate the entire kingdom. Is this the power of magic? A powerful magician can, on a whim, bring shame to monarchs and collapse mighty kingdoms. Will I someday wield such immense power too? Rhine's thoughts were heavy. He had done everything in his power just moments ago, yet had posed no real threat to the Black Witch. Even when attempting to cast spells on the Black Dragon, his efforts had been entirely ineffective. And that was when the Black Witch, Maleficent, was nearly drained of magic after unleashing her overwhelming curse. If she had been at her peak, wiping out all of them might have taken her only a few seconds. The Black Witch Maleficent was far beyond Rhine's current capabilities. He didn't know how long she had lived, but the gap between them was certainly not one that helping 2 or 3 children of destiny could close. Rhine sighed quietly. The old king seemed to age 10 years in an instant. His face was ashen and devoid of any color. He forced himself to stand, turning toward the 12 witches who now appeared just as battered. His voice trembled with desperation. "Save my daughter and this kingdom. There are so many of you, and you're all powerful witches. There must be something you can do. You must be able to break this curse, right?" The 12 witches exchanged helpless glances, unsure of what to say. The Black Witch's power is far too strong. Her curse, it's beyond what we can break. One witch stammered, her voice growing quieter until it faded into silence. Silence. A deathly silence hung over the ruined palace, filled with dust and debris. Neither the nation's ruler nor the powerful witches could find the courage to raise their heads or utter a word. Suddenly, the Violet Fairy, leader of the 12 witches, broke the silence. "No, there's still hope. There's one more thing we can try." The Violet Fairy turned to the silver-haired magician in a pristine white cloak, whose appearance seemed far too young. "We still have Lord Rhine, the sage of the kingdom, the court mage. Lord Rhine has not yet given the little princess his blessing." The king looked confused, as though he hadn't understood her words. At a time like this, why were they talking about blessings? Princess Aurora wouldn't even live past the age of 15. But the Violet Fairy grew more excited as she spoke. "The curse is bound to Princess Aurora. When she pricks her finger on the spindle and loses her life, it will set the kingdom's disaster in motion. We can have Lord Rhine bless the little princess and counteract the curse's magic." The other 11 witches froze upon hearing her words, their gazes suddenly filled with hope. They understood the miraculous power of blessings far better than the king did. Of course, that's an option. Almost forgot. Lord Rhine is a remarkable magician, too. We 12 have already bestowed our blessings, but Lord Rhine hasn't yet. The despairing atmosphere lifted slightly. The once hopeless expressions on the faces of the witches and the king began to show glimmers of optimism. All eyes turned to Rhine. The old king's eyes shone brightly, as though he had found a lifeline. He hurriedly asked the Violet Fairy, "So, if Lord Rhine gives Princess Aurora a blessing to break the curse, the Black Witch's curse will disappear, right?" At the same time, he fixed his gaze intently on Rhine, who stood nearby, deep in thought. The boy's small figure, leaning against the wall, cast a long shadow under the flickering light. Just minutes ago, this seemingly delicate child had turned the tide and saved everyone. Now, once again, he had become their final hope. The Violet Fairy shook her head regretfully. "Unfortunately, Your Majesty, even the power of blessings cannot completely remove the Black Witch's formidable curse. Every powerful curse has a specific method of being lifted. This one can only be broken by killing the Black Witch herself. And none of us here have the strength to challenge Maleficent's power." The old king's face fell, despair once again overtaking his aged features. The Violet Fairy quickly added, "But Lord Rhine's blessing can weaken the curse. If we can modify some of the curse's terms, we could turn the inevitable disaster into a crisis that we might resolve." After a long silence, Rhine finally spoke. "Yes, I still have one chance to give the princess a blessing. Fairy, what kind of blessing do you think I should bestow to counter this dark curse?" The Violet Fairy lowered her head slightly, lost in brief contemplation. What kind of blessing would be most effective in countering the Black Witch's curse at this moment? Before she could voice her thoughts, the young magician suddenly mimicked her tone, adopting a solemn manner as he declared, "Princess Aurora, even if you are pricked by the spindle, you will not die, but will instead fall into a deep sleep. The people of the kingdom will also fall into slumber rather than perish. A kiss from someone who truly loves you will awaken you and break the curse." The silver-haired boy turned to the Violet Fairy, his expression calm, and asked, "Is this the blessing you were about to suggest to me?" Yes, that's exactly it," the Violet Fairy stammered, taken aback. She stared at him in confusion. "What? How did you know what I was going to say? I hadn't even said anything yet." "Wait, that's not right. I hadn't even finished thinking about it, and you already figured it out?" The Violet Fairy couldn't find fault with Lord Rhine's proposed blessing. It was exactly what she would have come up with after careful deliberation. She had no doubt that if she were in Rhine's position, this would be the blessing she would choose to give. However, as a well-learned witch, the Violet Fairy knew that some magicians specialized in mind-reading and prophecy magic, so she didn't dwell on it too much. Perhaps Lord Rhine has skills in this area as well, she thought. She bowed deeply to Rhine, her voice sincere and filled with excitement. "Lord Rhine, please use the exact words you just spoke and bestow your blessing upon Princess Aurora." As a kind-hearted witch, she, like the king, didn't want to see the curse fulfilled. What's more, the Violet Fairy herself was part of the kingdom. She was also a target of the curse. The Black Witch, as the one who cast the curse, would likely be unaffected after leaving the kingdom. But the Violet Fairy feared that for the 12 witches and the rest of the kingdom's residents, even leaving might not help. The curse could follow them relentlessly, sparing no one. And, at the same time, the old king seemed to find new strength. "That's right. In addition to Lord Rhine's blessing, I, as the ruler of this kingdom, will do my utmost to prevent the conditions of the curse from being fulfilled. I will confiscate every spindle in the kingdom and forbid the princess from ever leaving the palace. My daughter will never come into contact with a spindle. If there are no spindles, Princess Aurora cannot be pricked by one. The Black Witch's curse will never come to pass." Rhine calmly summarized. "So, your plan is this. I will first give Princess Aurora the blessing we just discussed, transforming the curse's effect from death to sleep. Then, Your Majesty will confiscate all the spindles in the kingdom, addressing the curse at its root. With this double safeguard, we can fight against the curse. Is that correct?" The old king, the still-shaken queen, and the 12 witches all nodded in agreement. This seemed like the best, and indeed the only, way to counter the curse. Surely, there isn't a better blessing to give, is there? Ryan sighed softly, but instead of immediately beginning the blessing, he turned and bowed to the king. Your Majesty, before I bestow the blessing, would you like me to make a prophecy about the future? Would you like me to reveal what lies ahead if we attempt to counter the curse in this way? Hearing Ryan's words, the queen suddenly remembered the first time she met this young magician and the precise prophecy he had made. I almost forgot. Our court mage, Lord Ryan, is also a prophet who can see the future, she exclaimed with delight, turning to the witches to share this revelation. The witches and the king exchanged glances before turning to Ryan. Of course, Lord Ryan, please make a prophecy, they urged. The Violet Fairy, however, wasn't particularly impressed by the idea of prophecy. As the leader of the witches, she was familiar with divination and prophecy techniques. Unlike ordinary people like the king and queen, she understood that most prophecies were vague and cryptic, often more misleading than helpful. Ryan nodded slightly, hiding the smile in his heart. From the king and queen, he could sense an intense desire, an ardent wish to know what the future held. He had deliberately steered the conversation so they would request this prophecy from him, creating the perfect opportunity to fulfill their wish and absorb the resulting wish energy. Allow me to part the veil of destiny and glimpse the truth of the future. As the young magician chanted, his body began to levitate slightly. The wide sleeves of his robe fluttered, though there was no wind, and his chin lifted as his silver eyes glowed with an ethereal light. This looks amazing. I've never seen magic like this before, the Violet Fairy thought, her curiosity piqued. A few seconds later, the boy descended slowly, the silver glow in his eyes fading. Your Majesty, I have pierced the veil of destiny and seen the picture of the future. Allow me to reveal it to you. Ryan ran his fair palm across the silver mirror, causing ripples to spread outward. The king and queen, along with the 12 witches, all leaned in to see the image gradually forming within the mirror. The witches, even the highly knowledgeable Violet Fairy, were visibly surprised by the sight. Was the mirror directly showing scenes of the future? Typically, prophecies and divinations rarely achieved this level of clarity. Most magicians, when performing divinations, prefer to speak in riddles, being as vague and mystical as possible to keep their reputation intact. Of course, Ryan himself knew that the future displayed in the mirror was mostly based on his knowledge as a transmigrator of how this story would unfold. He only supplemented this understanding with a small amount of magic to fill in reasonable details. As for the spell that caused his eyes to glow silver, its only purpose was to create visual effects. Displaying scenes in this way might be unheard of for the magicians of this world. But to Ryan, who had been exposed to 21st century films, it was a trivial concept. The mirror showed scene after scene, almost like a movie. The old king issued a decree to confiscate all spindles in the kingdom and had them destroyed. This led to widespread discontent among the people. But nothing could change the king's resolve. Armored soldiers stormed into homes, pushing down women still weaving at their looms, shoving aside their children who tried to resist, and seizing the family's sole spindle amid screams and tears. To ensure no spindle escaped confiscation, the king locked little Princess Aurora in a small palace, forbidding her from taking even a single step outside. As time passed, the little princess grew up day by day, and all the blessings bestowed upon her by the witches came to fruition. She was intelligent and beautiful, gentle and graceful, beloved by everyone who met her. Her brilliance was unmatched, and she had an astonishing ability to memorize anything after reading it once. Yet this Princess Aurora, who embodied all the world's virtues, was never able to set foot on outdoor grass or chase butterflies in playful joy. From the moment she could remember, her life had been confined to a luxurious prison. Her entire world was bound by magnificent marble pillars and dazzling crystal chandeliers. The path from her boudoir to the grand hall was the extent of her universe. In the mirror, the teenage princess Aurora appeared with flowing, molten gold-like hair, sparkling emerald green eyes, and a beauty beyond compare. The queen trembled with emotion, instinctively covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Ryan was moved by her reaction, though he had no way of knowing Aurora's exact appearance as she grew up. However, countless works had depicted the grown-up sleeping beauty, books, Disney movies, and animations. The princess's appearance in the mirror was a composite of these depictions, further enhanced and refined, with details adjusted based on the current traits of baby Aurora blessed by the witches. Ryan had intentionally blurred the mirror's image and pulled the perspective further back, ensuring no one could scrutinize the fine details of Aurora's features. With tildes. Even if Aurora's real appearance as an adult slightly differed from this portrayal, that wouldn't be an issue. After all, it was more than 10 years into the future. No one would remember a slightly blurred image well enough to compare it with the real thing. Besides, once he bestowed that blessing, the direction of the Sleeping Beauty story would completely change. Aurora's demeanor and image would undergo a dramatic transformation. Do I really have a knack for being a con artist prophet? I sure know how to fool people. Ryan chuckled to himself inwardly. In the mirror, the young girl stood dazed, repeatedly gazing at the people coming and going through the doors, listening to the laughter from a world beyond her reach. Her eyes were filled with helplessness and depth, as though she were an observer from another world. But Aurora did not complain. She understood the curse, its causes, and the weight of the kingdom's fate resting on her shoulders. She accepted her father's decision and understood clearly that the door was a boundary she must never cross. Watching another group of people leave through the doors, heading into a world she could never step into, and disappearing beyond her view, the little princess sighed softly, smiled faintly, and returned to her room. Outside the mirror, the 12 witches, along with the king and queen, all saw this scene. The faint smile of Princess Aurora, tinged with helplessness, coupled with the little princess's breathtaking beauty. This sight stirred even the most hardened hearts. A few of the witches and the queen wore sorrowful expressions. A girl gifted with perfect health, capable of running freely, with an astonishing memory, universally beloved and full of grace, was permanently confined during the prime of her life, year after year, without end. The queen, who loved her daughter deeply, was already in tears. Seeing his wife's sorrow, the king's expression darkened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. Do not be sad. Compared to the catastrophic end this curse could bring, the price Aurora is paying is trivial. The condition for triggering the curse is Aurora being pricked by a spindle, after which the kingdom would face disaster. Our actions are meant to stop the curse from coming true, to protect our daughter and everyone else. This is but a small, necessary sacrifice. The queen nodded. She understood the bigger picture. She had simply been momentarily swayed by her daughter's radiant image in the mirror and felt a pang of maternal guilt. Yes, if it meant preventing the Black Witch's curse from coming to pass, any price was worth paying. The scenes in the mirror continued to unfold. The little Princess Aurora's favorite pastime was listening to stories about the outside world before bed. Rhine, the knowledgeable court mage, and other scholars would flip through books and tell her these tales. Each night, after the bedtime story ended and the lights were extinguished, the princess would gaze through the window at the glittering, starry sky beyond. Would falling down a rabbit hole truly lead to a hidden wonderland? Were there really mermaids in the depths of the ocean? And the giant's castle above the clouds? Was it merely a legend, or could it be real? Father, mother, once my 15th birthday passes, the curse will be lifted, and I'll finally be able to explore the outside world, right? The girl's jewel-like eyes sparkled with hope as she lay on her pillow. This was the promise she had been given for as long as she could remember. Tomorrow is my birthday. Aurora's voice was filled with unrestrained excitement. It was the day she had been waiting for her entire life, through thousands of days and nights. Father, mother, Sir Rhine, thank you. After tomorrow, Once the curse is broken, I want to go out and see everything. There's so many things I want to see, so many places I want to visit. I want to find out if the things written in books are true. The mirror froze on the image of Aurora's radiant smile, filled with boundless hope for the future. The scene then transitioned to the next. Aurora was celebrating her 15th birthday. The old king, watching the celebration unfold, felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. It seemed his precautions had worked after all. By confiscating all the spindles in the kingdom and confining the princess, he believed he had completely eliminated any chance of Aurora coming into contact with a spindle, thereby preventing the prophecy from coming true. Although I've confined my daughter for over a decade, and although seizing the kingdom's spindles caused public dissatisfaction, it was all worth it. The elderly monarch's white beard quivered as he spoke. Seeing the king's exuberance, Rhine sighed softly, a wave of emotion washing over him. The old king was still too naive. When had a prophecy ever been avoided so easily? In countless myths and fairy tales, any attempts to resist a prophecy through human effort only ended up facilitating its fulfillment. Your Majesty, in contrast to the king's relief, the expressions of the witches were far from relaxed. As practitioners of true magic, they could sense a faint but ominous premonition. In the very next moment, the image in the mirror abruptly changed. After the birthday celebration had ended and before the final toll of midnight, Aurora was still observing the last half hour of the prohibition. She wandered through the palace, aimlessly walking through the same rooms she had seen hundreds of thousands of times since her birth. Eventually, she arrived at an ancient tower. Inside the tower was a narrow staircase that led up to a door. Embedded in the door was a golden key. How strange. I don't think I've ever been here before, Aurora murmured, curiosity lighting up her features. She turned the golden key, and the door swung open effortlessly. Inside, an old woman sat busily spinning thread. Aurora, who had never seen a spinning wheel before, asked in confusion. "Hello, Granny. What are you doing here?" "Spinning thread," the old woman replied simply. "This little thing that spins, it looks so fun. May I take a closer look?" Aurora's curiosity got the better of her, and she stepped forward, reaching out for the spindle. Outside the mirror, the queen let out a piercing scream, her hand shooting out to cover the silver mirror in Rhine's hands. No, daughter, don't go near that thing." The old king turned pale, his expression one of utter shock. "Wait, no, but how could Aurora, inside the mirror, possibly hear the voices of her parents outside it?" As the king and queen watched in despair and terror, Aurora touched the spindle, pricking her finger instantly. The blessing no man-made or natural weapon can harm Aurora was, of course, ineffective against a spindle, which wasn't classified as a weapon. In the next second, the golden-haired girl collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The curse had been fulfilled. However, the blessing Rhine had once bestowed upon her also took effect. The princess did not die, but instead fell into a deep, dreamless slumber. At this moment, the king and queen rushed into the hall. The instant they stepped inside, they too succumbed to sleep. The horses in the stables, the dogs in the courtyard, the pigeons on the rooftops, and even the flies on the walls, all of them fell into slumber. Even the flames in the hearth ceased to burn, as though they too had drifted off to sleep. The sizzling of roasting meat went silent. Everything stopped moving. Everything sank into a deep, unbroken sleep. The curse of slumber blanketed the entire kingdom, sending every resident into an eternal rest. Not long after, thorny brambles began to grow across the land of the kingdom. Year after year, these wild plants grew taller and denser, eventually forming an impenetrable wall that obscured the palace entirely. Even the rooftops and chimneys disappeared beneath the green, tangled mass. 10 years passed. 20 years passed. 50 years passed. A legend began to spread about the cursed kingdom, telling the story of a beautiful princess who lay asleep within it. From then on, many princes came to explore. They attempted to hack their way through the thorny barrier to reach the palace, but none succeeded. Every hero who stepped onto this cursed land was either ensnared by the brambles or tripped by the undergrowth. It was as though countless hands reached out to grasp them, trapping them within until they ultimately met their end in agony. Outside the mirror, the old king gazed at his kingdom, now ruled by thorns and brambles, a cursed land no one dared to tread. His body trembled, weak and powerless. Why? Why couldn't we stop the curse? Why did a staircase in a room that never existed appear inside my palace? Why did an old woman with a spinning wheel appear out of thin air? None of it made any sense. The monarch, who had once ruled his kingdom with strength and wisdom, now collapsed into despair. He roared uncontrollably, his cries muffled by his hands as tears streamed down his face. It was as though he had truly lived through decades of time, as though all the disasters had already happened. The violet fairy gently patted the king's shoulder, offering comfort. "No, your majesty, this isn't your fault. A destined curse is like a prophecy. No matter how much effort is spent, the ending is often difficult to change." Seeing that the king had lost the will to continue watching the images in the mirror, Ryan lightly ran his small hand across its surface, wiping away the visions. As for the far future, even Ryan himself couldn't be certain. If the events unfolded according to the most popular version of Sleeping Beauty, then 100 years after the princess fell into slumber, a handsome prince would cut through the brambles, kiss the princess, and break the curse. But even Ryan wasn't sure if this world story would follow such a happy ending. After all, there were many variations of fairy tales. For instance, in the more primitive version of Sleeping Beauty, Sun, Moon, and Talia, the story took a much darker turn, involving assault and cannibalism, not exactly suitable for children. The one who awakened the princess wasn't a prince, but a neighboring king who was, to put it bluntly, a rapist. As Ryan retracted the mirror, he distinctly felt a surge of wish power infuse his soul, causing his magical power to increase once more. By leveraging his foresight as a transmigrator, he had successfully fulfilled the king and queen's wish to see the future, even if that future was grim. After fulfilling this wish, Ryan also gained a sliver of genuine prophetic power. With this new ability, he could vaguely glimpse distant events or future scenes, though the information was hazy and required a suitable medium to clarify. Ryan had long noticed, back when he provided free medical care, that repeatedly fulfilling the same person's wishes significantly reduced the effectiveness. Only the first 1 or 2 wishes yielded substantial results. Now that he had fulfilled the king and queen's wishes twice, he realized it was time to find other children of destiny. The queen, watching the young mage silently put away the silver mirror, was already sobbing uncontrollably. "Lord Ryan, is this truly our fate? No matter what we do, is there no way to break the curse or stop this disaster from coming?" To the astonishment of everyone present, Ryan shook his head. "No. According to the principles of magic, every curse has a method of breaking it. Otherwise, it could never have been established in the first place. When the Black Witch Maleficent cast the curse, she must have also embedded the conditions for lifting it. As long as we meet those conditions, we can break the curse. We don't need to wait for Princess Aurora's 15th birthday." The 12 witches, as well as the king and queen, fell silent. They all knew the method to completely lift the curse from the little princess. Killing the Black Witch would break the curse. But Maleficent's magic is far too powerful. She's not someone we can defeat. The old king cried out in despair. He then hesitated, a flicker of hope sparking in his mind, and asked tentatively, "Lord Ryan, are you suggesting that you can defeat Maleficent?" Could it be that Ryan had hidden some trump card during their previous battle? Was he confident enough to propose such a suggestion? Ryan smiled faintly and answered with certainty. "I cannot." The young mage continued. "Tonight, we face Maleficent immediately after she cast her powerful curse. If we challenge her again in the future, she will only grow stronger and even more invincible." The old king's mouth twitched and his face darkened. If Maleficent was already so powerful that she was nearly undefeatable, Then what was the point of saying all this? Who could possibly kill her? The king had known Maleficent was stronger than the other 12 witches, but he hadn't realized the gap between them was as vast as heaven and earth. The 12 witches wore similarly grim expressions. The battle with Maleficent, when she transformed into a massive black dragon, had left an indelible impression on them. Even though they were all spellcasters capable of bending nature and reshaping reality, the difference in their abilities was utterly despairing. Even if the entire royal army were assembled to face such a monstrous being, morale would crumble in an instant. Numbers alone could never defeat a dragon. Your Majesty, Rhine surveyed the solemn, downcast faces of the gathered crowd. Then, with a sweep of his platinum-colored robes, he bowed gently to the king and said, "And Nigerian Ira Epsilon, with my power alone, and even with the soldiers of the kingdom, we cannot defeat the black dragon Maleficent has become. But a warrior blessed with extraordinary gifts can." Through his study of the spellbook, Rhine had gained profound insights into this world's supernatural forces. Not only could magicians wield wondrous spells, but great warriors could also train their bodies to surpass the limits of any human from Earth. Rhine raised his voice. "Your Majesty, I know of such a warrior, one who is braver than any knight in your service, and far more clever. This warrior was bathed in powerful magic from the moment of birth, endowed with extraordinary strength, impervious to blades and arrows, and proficient in every form of swordsmanship. They master every weapon, armor, and shield known to mankind, and may even possess a hint of magical knowledge. When this warrior draws their sword, only the gods themselves could rival their skill. When they pull their bowstring, their arrows can pierce targets across half a kingdom. When this warrior rides a noble steed into battle, even scattered armies will yield to their charisma and obey their commands. When they sing a battle hymn amidst a broken and defeated army, even the most disorganized troops will rally, regroup, and willingly sacrifice their lives in their name. I believe such a warrior could lead your Majesty's army to slay the Black Witch and break the curse at its root." Rhine's voice rang with conviction as he painted the image of an unparalleled hero. After hearing Rhine's words, the king and queen were utterly stunned. The 12 witches were equally taken aback, especially Violet Fairy, the leader of the 12 witches, who was visibly shocked. This young-looking magician actually knew such a powerful warrior? Recalling how Rhine had previously demonstrated magic far beyond her own, Violet Fairy began to suspect that the boy before them might not be as young as he appeared. Could he actually be an ancient wizard, hundreds of years old, pretending to be young? "Lord Rhine, is what you said true? You actually know such an incredible warrior? Why didn't you say so earlier?" The old king's eyes widened in disbelief. The elderly man, now completely devoid of his regal authority, grasped this final lifeline. He grabbed Rhine's robe and questioned him anxiously. "Please tell me, Lord Rhine, where is this warrior? In which kingdom does he reside now? I want to hire him, even if it means emptying the entire royal treasury. Oh, and I can also offer him my daughter in marriage, allowing him to become the new master of the kingdom. I am willing to present the entire kingdom as a gift to him, as long as he can help me defeat the Black Witch and lift the curse." Rhine remained composed, his expression unchanged. After a brief pause, he said calmly, "Your Majesty, let me confirm this. Are you truly determined to meet this warrior and willing to pay any price, even making him the future ruler of the kingdom?" The old king froze for half a second at the question. Then, the increasingly weary monarch nodded firmly, his eyes filled with emptiness. If the curse couldn't be lifted, the kingdom would be destroyed anyway. What use was it then? Rhine smiled. "Your Majesty, since you have made your decision, allow me to take you to meet this warrior." Under the watchful gazes of the kingdom's monarch, queen, and witches, Rhine took deliberate steps forward. 1 step, 2 steps. The young magician walked to the cradle of the little princess. After the blessings of the 12 witches, Rhine spread his arms wide and bestowed upon the swaddled, sleeping beauty The 13th and final blessing. A with grave O. Princess Aurora, recipient of 12-fold blessings. I grant you 3 gifts: the talent for battle, unyielding courage, and the power to uphold justice. I bless you to become the great warrior I have just described, to defeat the Black Witch Maleficent, and to personally break the curse upon you. Rhine turned lightly. That is the blessing I bestow upon Princess Aurora. Behind him, from the cradle and swaddling cloth, a brilliant light erupted, so dazzling that no one could keep their eyes open. The radiance signified the blessing had been delivered. Dead silence. Whether it was the king and queen, who were the princess's parents, or the 12 witches, all of them stood frozen, as if they had been turned to stone. You couldn't blame them for their shock. They had never thought along these lines before. Rhine's actions completely overturned the traditional mindset of these fairy tale characters. Was this a blessing usually given to a princess? They had never even heard of such an example. Rhine's face remained natural, as if he had just done something entirely logical. It was actually the others' stunned reactions that left him speechless. Wasn't what he did a perfectly reasonable course of action? The only resource they had left to potentially counter the Black, which was this final opportunity to bless Aurora. Blessings, much like curses, carried a causal, self-fulfilling power. If the Black Witch could impose an inescapable curse, then they could use the same principle to preset a favorable outcome through a blessing. Compared to a passive defensive blessing like the princess will not die but will only fall into a deep sleep, wouldn't it be 100 times better to declare in the blessing, the princess will slay the Black Witch and lift the curse herself? The king finally broke out of his shock and asked in a mix of surprise and doubt, "Lord Rhine, what is this?" Rhine smiled and patiently explained, "Your Majesty, the future Princess Aurora will become the perfect warrior I just described. The blessings of the witches have already granted Princess Aurora all the positive qualities of mankind. Her Royal Highness, the princess, has been blessed with a healthy body, immune to illness and fatigue. This will allow her to become the bravest of warriors. Her Royal Highness has been blessed with perfect memory and exceptional talent for learning, enabling her to easily master supreme swordsmanship and even magic. Her Royal Highness has been blessed with a voice that captivates hearts and a charm that enchants the masses. Because of this, she will become a commander capable of inspiring soldiers to follow her unto death, a shining banner in the midst of any army. Where she's present, morale will soar. As long as she stands, the army will never falter. Furthermore, Her Highness carries the blessing of being invulnerable to blades, fire, and water, making her the only one immune to the dragon's flames and capable of plunging a blade into the heart of the beast. And with the blessing I have just bestowed, Princess Aurora will undoubtedly become the kingdom's greatest warrior, slay the Black Witch Maleficent, and personally lift the curse that would have caused her to be pricked by a spindle at the age of 15. The old king stood there, dazed, replaying in his mind the details of the warrior Rhine had described. Indeed, every part perfectly matched the blessings the witches had previously given to the princess. Although he found it surprisingly logical, the old king couldn't help but roar internally. Is this even allowed? After a series of psychological exchanges and initial shock, the old king surprisingly began to feel a bit relieved. He had already resolved himself to give the kingdom to an unfamiliar warrior. Now, seeing that it would be given to his own child instead of a stranger, wasn't that actually better? Shifting his gaze away from the king, Rhine glanced at the witches, who were still frozen in disbelief. What now? The blessings of invulnerability to blades, fire, and water. Weren't those your doing? Why act so surprised? Clearing his throat, Rhine continued, "Everyone, the blessing I gave to Princess Aurora today must remain a secret. After leaving the kingdom, the Black Witch Maleficent could still monitor the development of the curse. If she learns that we used a blessing to create a warrior destined to defeat her, she will certainly try to disrupt the blessing's fulfillment. The power of blessings is ultimately limited. We cannot sit idly by and wait for prophecy to fulfill itself. We must actively work to make it come true. Earlier, during the discussion about what blessing to grant, Rhine had discreetly sent away all the soldiers and servants nearby, ensuring that only the king, queen, and witches were aware of the blessing's details. Rhine had also considered granting an exaggerated blessing, such as omniscience and omnipotence. However, blessings had their limits. If they couldn't even remove Maleficent's curse outright, they certainly couldn't bestow power surpassing the Black Witch herself. Thus, Rhine devised a tailored blessing that emphasized innate talent and a fated path. Turning to the old king, Rhine said, "To ensure the success of the blessing, there are 3 tasks I must trouble your majesty with." The old king, despite everything, was worthy of being called a king. By now, he had accepted the absurd reality before him. "Please, Lord Rhine, instruct me." Unconsciously, after everything that had happened, the king had begun to view the young magician before him as his only source of hope and support. Thus, when Rhine presented his suggestions, the king naturally felt they should be followed. Rhine spoke slowly. "The first task. Your Majesty must keep tonight's events a secret. Do not let the kingdom's people learn that this land has been cursed by the Black Witch and faces destruction in a few decades. If word gets out, the entire kingdom will be thrown into chaos. From the most powerful nobles to the wealthiest merchants, everyone will do everything they can to escape this cursed land. Your Majesty's court will be devoid of wise ministers. Your army will have no brave soldiers willing to fight. The kingdom's fields will no longer see diligent farmers. If that happens, the kingdom will collapse from within long before the curse arrives." Hearing Rhine's warning, the old king nodded lightly. It was indeed a major risk, but could the curse truly be avoided just by fleeing the kingdom? If so, then, seemingly sensing what the king was pondering, Rhine's youthful, water-like eyes dimmed slightly. He sighed softly and explained, "I just performed a divination using Her Royal Highness as a medium to determine the nature of the curse. Maleficent's curse cannot be avoided, even by fleeing the kingdom. But even if your Majesty says so, the people are unlikely to believe you. They will only see it as the schemes of those in power. Our goal is to lift the curse. The kingdom must not collapse under the weight of a different curse, one named fear, before the witch's curse even takes effect." As Rhine spoke, a few of the witch's expressions subtly changed. Sweeping his gaze over them, Rhine continued, "The second task. Your Majesty must pretend that I never showed you a glimpse of the future and never gave Princess Aurora this unique blessing. Proceed with your original plans, such as confiscating spindles from the populace and creating the false impression that Princess Aurora is confined within the palace. Meanwhile, I, along with the 12 witches, will take Her Royal Highness away from the palace. Before the day of the curse arrives, we will train her to become both a queen fit to rule the throne and a warrior capable of slaying the dragon." Rhine then elaborated on the details of his plan. The king accepted them without objection, though the queen's expression revealed a trace of sorrow. Finally, the young magician continued, "The third task is as follows. Next, I will take Her Royal Highness, the princess, away from the palace for a long time until I can raise her into a self-reliant warrior. During this time, I must ask your Majesty to spread tales about me. Feel free to embellish and exaggerate them. Before I became a court mage, I used potions and spells to cure thousands of patients, but the scale of my influence is still far from sufficient. Moreover, the stories about me now need to include even more critical details. These tales should emphasize that the kingdom is home to a magician capable of granting wishes. If someone harbors a wish strong enough, and they recite the legendary title, their wish may come true. The title is as follows: Sage Beyond the World, Prophet Who Foresees the Future, Wizard of Miracles and Wishes." When Rhine made his request, not only was the king perplexed, but even the 12 witches, well-versed in magic, couldn't quite understand his intentions. Was defining a multi-part title for others to recite some sort of magical ritual? Yet, The idea of a story where simply chanting a name could make wishes come true did have a certain mystical charm. Of course, it's no problem. Lord Rhine, everything will be as you wish. The king agreed without hesitation. To him, this was the simplest of requests. Rhine smiled and thanked the king. This, too, was one of his own innovations in using prophetic power, a concept inspired by novels. Unlike the other magicians of this world, I possess many novel ideas from another world, from another time. As I fulfill more wishes and accumulate supernatural rewards, those elements from Earth's entertainment works can all be replicated one by one. Reflecting on this, Rhine couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. After his confrontation with the Black Witch, Rhine had come to a sobering realization. Compared to the truly powerful magicians of this world, he still had a long way to go. That night, the king's soldiers stormed into the old craftsman's residence. Acting on orders, they sought to arrest the deceitful craftsman and have him hanged. However, when they burst through the doors, they found that the old craftsman had already hung himself from a beam. After learning of the disastrous events at the banquet, the old craftsman had taken his own life out of guilt. The old craftsman left behind a letter, pleading for the king and Lord Rhine's mercy. In his letter, he begged them to spare his family, including his wife and his younger brother Oz, who worked in the circus. Weeks passed since the great battle within the royal palace. The version of the story circulating among the common folk had transformed into the following account. The infamous Black Witch, Maleficent, had been invited to Princess Aurora's baptism ceremony, but suddenly flew into a rage at the banquet. She attacked the king's guards, causing significant casualties among the soldiers. Fortunately, the kingdom's court mage, the wise sage, and grand magician, Lord Rhine, displayed extraordinary power. He protected the king and queen and, along with the 12 witches, turned the tide and repelled Maleficent. Now, it was rumored that the Black Witch Maleficent had fled to another kingdom. As for the critical fact that the witch cursed the princess and even the entire kingdom, it was deliberately omitted. The sun continued to rise as usual, but no one knew that the shadow of death already loomed over the entire kingdom. In this period, a new fantastical legend began to spread between taverns and campfires. Have you heard the story of the magician who grants wishes? Do you think it's true? Come on, Jerry, you're not a 3-year-old. How could such fairy tales be real? But I heard someone say that the magician from the story is the same Lord Rhine who treated thousands of patients in the southern region before becoming the kingdom's sage. Having a real person as the inspiration for the story isn't unusual. Besides, Lord Rhine is now the kingdom's revered court magician. Why would he bother listening to the wishes of commoners like us? The versions of the legend varied wildly, but they all revolved around a mysterious boy magician who could grant wishes. Almost every version also mentioned a peculiar title. It was said that a starving and desperate child once recited the title and made a wish. Not long after, a brightly colored bird brought her bread and water. After a few such incidents seemed to come true, the legend spread rapidly, becoming a bedtime story for many children and even starting to gain traction beyond the kingdom's borders. However, most people who made wishes out of curiosity saw no miracles come pass. Some doubted the legend's authenticity, while others believed that only particularly sincere wishes had a small chance of being fulfilled. During this time, Oz was in a poor state. As a circus's hot air balloon operator and headline magician, he was constantly consumed by fear and unease. Oz, are you in some sort of trouble? I have a suggestion. Do you want to hear it? A colleague at the circus tried to comfort the pale-faced Oz. No, just leave me alone, Oz muttered, waving them off. Only Oz knew that his terror was something he couldn't share with others. A few days ago, his older brother, the craftsman who had served the royal court for many years, had taken his own life out of guilt for faking the golden plate. Even worse, according to rumors Oz had picked up, the fake golden plate was what had provoked Maleficent's sudden attack at the princess's baptism ceremony. It's all over. It's all over. It's because my brother provoked the Black Witch that this disaster happened. What's even scarier is that my brothers seem to get the idea to commit fraud from my careless joke. If His Majesty discovers that this is connected to me, I'm as good as dead. No, even if His Majesty doesn't find out, he might still vent his anger on me. The more Oz thought about it, the more terrified he became. He trembled uncontrollably, overwhelmed with regret and despair. Oz, while I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, I have a suggestion. You could try making a wish to the magician from the recent legend. They say that only particularly strong and sincere wishes have a chance of coming true. With the state you're in, maybe it'll actually work. The colleague, who had been sent away earlier, reappeared at some point. Poking his head around the doorframe, he offered the suggestion. Make a wish to the magician from the legend? Oz froze, his eyes flickering with a hint of light. He had heard about the wish-granting magician legend recently as well. It didn't cost anything, so why not give a try? But the very next moment, Oz dismissed the thought. What a joke. The magician in the legend was said to be none other than the kingdom's sole sage, the king's advisor, and the royal court mage, Lord Rhine. Oz had offended the king, and now he was supposed to seek help from the king's advisor and court magician? What kind of suicidal thinking was that? If the great magician really could hear his heartfelt prayers from afar, Oz thought, then it would be a mercy if he didn't send a bolt of lightning down to strike him dead. With that, Oz's glimmer of hope extinguished, leaving him in despair. His face darkened, clouded by the shadow of his hopeless situation. As the saying goes, what you think about by day, you'll dream of by night. That night, Oz couldn't sleep peacefully at all. He dreamed of soldiers breaking down his door, capturing him, and condemning him to death by hanging. Terrified by the nightmare, the crying Oz, desperate and panicked, decided to give the legend one last shot. He repeated the words from a story. Sage beyond the world, prophet who foresees the future, wizard of miracles and wishes. Please, I just want to live. Help me escape this kingdom safely. As Dream Oz chanted the plea, the real Oz muttered the same words in his sleep. Far away, on a distant road, having packed up and left the palace with little Princess Aurora, Rhine was traveling in a bumpy carriage when he heard the faint sound of a distant plea. Lately, Rhine often heard distant voices of wishes being made. Each day, he would pick the strongest wishes to listen to closely and make them come true. Rhine didn't need to physically go to where the wishmakers were. Instead, he would summon small natural spirits or birds or issue orders to local officials to indirectly provide aid. Suddenly, he heard another voice of prayer from afar. What an incredible wish force! Rhine shuddered slightly. This time, the wishmaker was a child of destiny, or more accurately, a protagonist of fate. Rhine had long suspected that the so-called children of destiny were characters from fairy tales with significant presence. However, he had never had the opportunity to confirm this theory until now. Closing his eyes quickly, Rhine tuned in to Oz's prayer. A magician and balloon operator named Oz works in a circus, fears being implicated in the fake golden plate incident. Reading the details of the wish, Rhine chuckled softly. So that's all? He's just scared of this. Well, since you prayed to me in your dream, I'll grant your wish, Rhine muttered with a small smile. The content of the wish, to escape the kingdom and find a safe place. As he thought about it, many connections began forming in Rhine's mind regarding Oz's identity. The name Oz, a child of destiny, a timid personality, skilled in magic tricks and balloon piloting. Could it be that Oz? The scammer King Oz from the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, or the Wizard of the Land of Oz? In this classic fairy tale, the protagonist Dorothy is swept away by a tornado to a magical dreamland called the Land of Oz, where she embarks on a fantastical journey and befriends the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Yin-Gyo-E. The Land of Oz is protected by powerful witches in the east, west, north, and south. Meanwhile, in the center of the land's Emerald City resides Oz, a supposedly great and powerful wizard. Of course, as the story unfolds, readers following Dorothy's perspective discover that the so-called Great Wizard Oz is actually a fraud. His magic is nothing more than a collection of clever tricks and illusions. So it's that Oz. This must be Oz before he goes to the Land of Oz. Well, it's obviously not called the Land of Oz yet. Oz hasn't even gone there yet. Guess it'll be a few more years before the Emerald City is built. And a long time after that, Dorothy will finally arrive in the Land of Oz. I can't believe I've arrived in such an early era and met the future Great Wizard Oz. This realization caught Rhine slightly off guard. After all, in the original The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Oz's hometown was Omaha, Nebraska, in the United States. However, since this mixed fairy tale world didn't have a country called the United States of America, it made sense for Oz's birthplace and background to have shifted. Rhyme began considering how to fulfill Oz's wish. In the original story, Oz ends up in a magical land due to a hot air balloon accident. So, let's help him fulfill that prophecy. Today, the circus where Oz worked was holding a regular performance. Before the show began, Oz sat in an ascending hot air balloon, attracting the crowd's attention and gathering them together to buy tickets. Suddenly, someone in the audience shouted, "Wow, it's the king's soldiers. Are they here to watch the circus too?" Peering out of the balloon basket, Oz spotted a small squad of soldiers approaching. Damn it, my nightmare is coming true. They must be here on the king's orders to capture me." The brilliant magician turned pale as a corpse, trembling uncontrollably in the balloon basket. Snap! Before Oz could react, the ropes tethering the balloon suddenly snapped. What's happening? Why did the ropes break? The untethered balloon, now at the mercy of the wind, rose higher and higher into the sky. The balloon floated farther and farther away, carried by the breeze. The audience below screamed in astonishment. The magician Oz is still up in the balloon. Someone save him!